My name is Emily, and I am 32 years old. What I'm about to tell you is a story about betrayal so deep it felt like the ground vanished beneath my feet while I was literally thousands of miles in the air, soaring across continents, on the brink of the biggest professional achievement of my life. If you've ever felt like the people who should have loved and supported you the most were actually the ones quietly, or sometimes not so quietly, chipping away at your foundation, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if the idea of losing everything you worked for because of someone else's malice resonates with you, hit that like button. You are not alone in this. This story is about picking up the pieces when others try to shatter you, and if that sounds like something you need to hear, or if you've been through it too, please subscribe for more stories like mine. Growing up, I was always the one who seemed to have it together. Or at least, that was the narrative that got assigned to me. I was the older sister, the one who did well in school, the one who seemed capable and independent. My younger sister, Clara, was different. She was more artistic, more sensitive, and struggled more with, well, just about everything, it seemed. Academics were a challenge. Social situations often overwhelmed her, and she seemed to move through the world with a fragility that constantly drew attention and concern, particularly from our mother, Eleanor. Our mother had a way of orbiting Clara, a gravitational pull that made everything about her needs, her feelings, her struggles. It wasn't that she didn't love me. I think she did, in her way. But my way was different. I didn't seem to need the constant reassurance, the hovering attention. I didn't create the dramatic crises that required her immediate, all-consuming focus. Because I appeared strong, I think she assumed I was strong. Strong enough to handle anything on my own, strong enough not to need the same emotional bandwidth she dedicated to Clara. What she didn't understand, or perhaps didn't want to understand, was that everyone needs love and support, even the ones who seem to have it all figured out. My independence wasn't a shield. It was just how I navigated the world, quietly working, quietly achieving, hoping my accomplishments would be seen and celebrated, a different kind of validation than Clara's needs seemed to elicit. This dynamic set the stage for a quiet, persistent current of resentment. Clara, I believe, resented my perceived ease and success, even if she struggled to articulate it beyond passive-aggressive comments or a sullen withdrawal when I shared good news. Mother, I suspect, resented my independence. My drive to build my own life felt like a rejection of her central role, a departure from the family unit she wanted to keep close and dependent. It was a subtle, insidious tension woven into the fabric of our family life. It wasn't always overt conflict, but a pervasive atmosphere where my achievements felt slightly diminished, my struggles overlooked, and Clara's needs amplified to fill any void. I poured myself into my career. I found a place where my drive and competence were not just seen, but rewarded. I worked in corporate finance, a high-pressure, high-stakes world that demanded long hours, intense focus, and a willingness to constantly push boundaries. I thrived on it. I rose quickly through the ranks, each promotion, each successful project, feeling like a small victory not just for my career, but for my self-worth in a way my family never fully provided. My job became my anchor, the place where I was validated for being exactly who I was: driven, capable, successful. I worked for a large international firm, dealing with mergers, acquisitions, and complex financial deals. It was demanding, requiring extensive travel and often blurring the lines between work life and personal life. This, of course, became another point of contention with my family. My mother would complain I was never around, that I prioritized work over family, that I was missing out on important moments. These moments often revolved around Clara's latest issue, which only reinforced my feeling that my presence was only truly valued when I was needed to orbit her. Meanwhile, Clara drifted through various jobs, never finding her footing, often relying on Mother for financial support and emotional cushioning. This disparity in our lives, my evident professional success versus her ongoing struggle, seemed to exacerbate the underlying tension. I tried to be supportive, offering advice, connections, even financial help when she asked, but it always felt like I was walking on eggshells, that my success was a painful mirror to her, and any attempt to help was tinged with the risk of making her feel worse. The deal I was working on was immense, a multi-billion-dollar acquisition that would redefine a significant sector of the global market. It involved complex negotiations with 4 key clients spread across 2 continents, North America and Europe. Securing this deal had been my focus for over a year. It was grueling work, late nights, early mornings, constant travel, navigating different time zones, different business cultures, different personalities. But it was also exhilarating. It was the kind of challenge I lived for, the kind of project that, if successful, would cement my reputation and propel my career to a new level. It was a $2 billion deal. $2 billion. And it depended on securing agreements with 4 major clients simultaneously. I was the lead negotiator, the point person, the one responsible for bringing it all together. The pressure was immense, but I felt ready. I had built strong relationships with the client teams over months of preliminary work. I had anticipated roadblocks and planned strategies to overcome them. I was confident, prepared, and absolutely dedicated. This wasn't just a job. It felt like a culmination of everything I had worked for. The final stage required me to travel to 2 different European cities to finalize agreements with the last 2 key clients. The schedule was brutal. Fly overnight to City A, spend 2 intensive days in meetings, fly to City B, 2 more days of meetings, then fly back home, hopefully with signed contracts and the deal closed. I packed my bags, feeling a mix of exhaustion and adrenaline. This was it. The finish line was in sight. Before I left, I had the usual strained conversations with my family. Mother expressed her usual concerns about me working too hard, about the travel being too much, thinly veiled criticisms of my life choices. Clara was distant, offering monosyllabic responses when I mentioned the trip. I tried to share some of the excitement, the significance of the deal, but their reactions were muted, almost dismissive. It was as if they couldn't grasp, or didn't want to grasp, the magnitude of what I was doing. Or perhaps they did grasp it, and that was the problem. My success highlighted their own perceived lack of it. I shrugged it off as I usually did. I told myself I didn't need their validation. I had my colleagues, my mentors, my own internal measure of success. I said my goodbyes, promising to call when I could, knowing those calls would likely be brief and filled with the same underlying tension. The flight to Europe was long. I tried to rest, but my mind was buzzing with details of the negotiations ahead. I reviewed client profiles, legal documents, financial models. The cabin lights dimmed, the drone of the engines was constant, and somewhere over the Atlantic, I finally drifted into a restless sleep, dreaming of contract clauses and bottom lines. We landed in City A in the early morning. The air was crisp, the city just beginning to wake up. I felt a surge of anticipation. This was the first critical stop. I checked my phone as soon as I turned off airplane mode, expecting urgent emails from my team or maybe a brief message from a client. Instead, I saw a string of missed calls and a curt email from my direct supervisor. The subject line was simple: urgent, call me immediately. Below it, a follow-up email from Human Resources. My stomach clenched. This couldn't be good. Urgent emails from HR while you are about to close a multi-billion-dollar deal on another continent are never good. My hands trembled as I dialed my supervisor's number. It rang for what felt like an eternity before he answered, his voice tight, strained. "Emily," he said, not even a hello. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper above the airport noise. "I just landed. Is everything okay with client A?"
No, Emily.
"Everything is not okay," his tone was grave. "There have been some serious concerns raised." "Concerns? What concerns? About the deal?" "We're on track. I've triple-checked everything." "Not about the deal, Emily."
About you.
My heart hammered against my ribs. "About me? What are you talking about?" "Allegations have been made, Emily, concerning your professional conduct, your stability under pressure. There are reports of erratic behavior, distraction, even suggestions you've been sharing confidential information inappropriately." I staggered back, leaning against a cold pillar in the arrival hall. The bustling airport faded into a blur. Allegations? That's insane.
Who would say that?
Where are these reports coming from? We can't disclose the source, Emily. But the information is credible. It's come from people who know you personally and have expressed grave concerns about your current state and suitability to handle a deal of this magnitude. My mind raced. People who know me personally? Who would do this? Who had access to me, to information about my life? The list was short. My blood ran cold as a terrifying realization began to dawn. This can't be happening, I whispered. This is impossible. I am here, ready to close this deal. I've worked my entire life for this. These allegations are lies. We understand this is difficult, Emily. But the nature of the concerns, coupled with the sensitivity of the deal, the firm cannot take the risk. Effective immediately, your employment with the firm is terminated. Terminated. The word hung in the air, heavy, final. Fired. While standing in a foreign airport, thousands of miles from home, minutes away from the most important meeting of my career. Fired. I choked out, the word alien on my tongue. You're firing me?
Now?
Based on anonymous. Personal allegations? What about the deal? What about the clients? What about the $2 billion we're about to secure? Another team is being dispatched immediately, my supervisor said, his voice softening slightly, perhaps hearing the raw shock in mine. They will attempt to salvage the situation. Your access to all company systems has been revoked. You are required to return all company property and arrange your travel back home as soon as possible. Return company property. I looked down at the briefcase in my hand, full of binders, laptops, contracts. I'm in Europe. The deal is here. The clients are waiting for me.
I'm sorry, Emily.
The decision is final. He hung up.
Just like that.
The line went dead, leaving me standing alone in a foreign airport, the weight of the world crushing me. My career, my reputation, the deal I had poured my heart and soul into, all gone in an instant. And it wasn't even about my work performance. It was about concerns raised by people who knew me personally. There was no doubt left in my mind. It had to be family. I sank onto a nearby bench, the energy draining from my body. $2 billion. For clients. Vanished. Not because I failed, but because someone had deliberately sabotaged me. And I knew who. The flight back was a blur of disbelief and agony. I couldn't process it. I was fired. The biggest deal of my career was collapsing, potentially entirely lost, and it was because my own family had apparently gone to my company and fed them lies about me. Lies serious enough to warrant immediate termination of a lead negotiator on a live, massive deal. What could they have possibly said? How could they have convinced my firm, a company that had trusted me with so much, to cut ties so abruptly, so brutally? The questions gnawed at me, fueling a cold, simmering rage that replaced the initial shock. By the time I landed back home, I wasn't just heartbroken. I was incandescent with fury. I didn't go to my apartment. I took a cab straight to my parents' house. I needed answers. I needed to confront them. I walked up the familiar path to the front door, each step heavier than the last. The house looked the same, deceptively peaceful. I let myself in with my key, the sound of the lock clicking echoing in the sudden silence of the hall. I heard voices from the living room, Mother and Clara. They sounded normal, chatting about something trivial. The sheer ordinariness of it was jarring, sickening, given the nuclear bomb that had just detonated in my life because of them. I walked into the living room, still in my travel clothes, exhausted, disheveled, my eyes burning with unshed tears and fury. They both looked up, startled. "Emily, what are you doing here?" "I thought you were in Europe?" Mother exclaimed, her voice laced with surprise that quickly turned to something that looked like apprehension. Clara just stared, her face pale, her eyes wide with what looked suspiciously like guilt. "Don't act innocent," I said, my voice low and shaking. "I know what you did." Mother frowned. "What are you talking about, Emily? What is this about?" "I was fired," I stated, the words still hard to say aloud.
Today.
While I was in Europe, about to close the deal. A flicker of something unreadable crossed Mother's face. Clara visibly flinched. Fired?
Why?
What happened? Mother's voice was a little too high, a little too innocent. Don't play dumb. I exploded, the carefully contained rage boiling over. I was fired because of allegations made by people who know me personally. People who said I was unstable, erratic, even leaking confidential information. That's you, isn't it? You too. You went to my company. Mother's face hardened. Don't you dare accuse us, Emily. Who else could it be? I demanded, looking from her to Clara, whose gaze was fixed on the floor. Who else knows enough about me, enough about my life, to spin lies convincing enough to get me fired from a $2 billion deal? A deal I worked on for over a year. Clara finally spoke, her voice small. We were just worried about you, Emily. Worried. I scoffed, a harsh sound. Worried about what? My success? My independence? My life that didn't revolve around you. You are working too hard, Mother interjected, stepping forward as if to shield Clara. You were always stressed, always flying somewhere. You weren't sleeping. You seemed overwhelmed. So, your solution was to get me fired? I asked, incredulous. To destroy my career? To cost me everything I worked for? Do you have any idea what this deal meant? Any idea what being fired like this does to someone in my industry? It's professional death. We didn't expect you to be fired. Clara cried out, finally looking up, tears welling in her eyes. We told them you were struggling, that you needed a break, that maybe you weren't handling the pressure well. You told them I wasn't handling the pressure? On the eve of closing a $2 billion deal? My voice was dripping with disbelief and pain. That's not worry, Clara. That's sabotage. What exactly did you tell them? Clara hesitated, looking at Mother. Mother gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. I told them you were. You were talking about things, Clara mumbled, twisting her hands. About the deal.
To me.
And you seemed confused sometimes, like you weren't thinking straight. And I told them you mentioned being in debt because of investments, and maybe that made you desperate. I stared at her, stunned into silence for a moment.
Debt?
Investments? I had mentioned offhand months ago that I was considering buying a small property and talking about mortgages. It was a normal adult conversation. And talking about things. I had shared some high-level details about the process of the deal with them, trying to make them understand why I was so busy so they wouldn't feel neglected. I had never shared confidential information. And confused? Not thinking straight? These were carefully crafted phrases designed to undermine my competence and stability. You twisted everything, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You took normal conversations, normal life things, and you poisoned them. You deliberately painted a picture of me as unstable and compromised. We were scared for you, Mother insisted, stepping in again. You were so focused on work, you weren't yourselves. We thought if they saw you were struggling, they would just make you take some time off. Reassign you. Something like that. We never thought they'd fire you. You never thought. I laughed, a dry, bitter sound. What did you think would happen when you told a major financial firm that their lead negotiator on their biggest deal was unstable, confused, and potentially desperate for money? Did you think they'd send me a get-well card? It wasn't like that. Clara whimpered. I told them you seemed different.
Stressed.
And Mother agreed. We just wanted you home. We missed you. You missed me? I echoed, the irony piercing. You miss me so much you decided to destroy my life to get my attention? That's not love. That's cruelty. That's malice. How dare you? Mother exclaimed, genuinely outraged now. After everything we've done for you, the sacrifices we made. You're calling us malicious because we were concerned about our daughter's well-being? Concerned, I repeated, shaking my head. The gaslighting was suffocating. You weren't concerned. You were jealous. You were resentful. Clara, you couldn't stand that I had built a successful life for myself while you felt stuck. And Mother, You couldn't stand that I didn't need you the way Clara does. You both conspired to cut me down, to force me back into a role you were comfortable with, the struggling daughter who needed her family to rescue her. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Clara broke down, sobbing, admitting bits and pieces through her tears, her envy, her feeling overlooked, how easy it was to twist things when she talked to Mother. Mother remained defiant, though her face was pale and drawn. She didn't deny speaking to my company, didn't deny confirming Clara's fabricated concerns. Her justification remained rooted in twisted maternal worry and a narrative of my perceived neglect of the family. "You have ruined me," I said, my voice breaking, tears finally streaming down my face. "You didn't just get me fired. You shattered my reputation. You cost me my career. You cost me everything I worked for. $2 billion vanished because you couldn't handle your own insecurities and resentments." "Don't exaggerate, Emily," Mother said, her voice dangerously calm now. "You'll find another job. It's not the end of the world." "Not the end of the world?" I repeated, incredulous at her complete lack of comprehension or empathy. "This is MY World. You took a wrecking ball to MY World. And you did it deliberately, out of spite. That's unfair." Clara cried, though her tears seemed more self-pitying than remorseful for what she had done to me. "Unfair." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not my struggling younger sister, but the architect of my destruction. "You lied to my employer, fabricated stories to make me look incompetent and unstable, and you call me unfair?" The confrontation escalated, voices rising, accusations flying. I laid bare years of suppressed feelings, the constant comparison, the feeling of being second best, the way my achievements were always downplayed. They countered with their own grievances, my absence, my focus on work, my perceived arrogance. It was a toxic eruption, years of buried resentment and misunderstanding finally surfacing in the most painful way imaginable. In the end, there was no real resolution in that moment. No heartfelt apologies that felt genuine enough to matter. Mother remained defensive, justifying her actions as misguided care. Clara was a mix of guilt and self-pity, unable or unwilling to truly grasp the magnitude of the damage she had caused. I stood there, emotionally raw, facing the two people who were supposed to be my family, my safe harbor, and realizing they were the very ones who had sunk my ship. I left their house that day knowing things could never go back to how they were. The betrayal was too profound, the damage too extensive. I couldn't unhear what they had admitted, couldn't unfeel the pain of knowing my own sister and mother had actively worked to ruin me. The aftermath was incredibly difficult. I had to deal with the professional fallout. The firm didn't give me a detailed explanation beyond citing breach of trust based on the credible allegations. My attempts to explain the familial sabotage were met with polite dismissal. Without hard proof beyond my word against theirs, it was my word against the perceived concerns of my family, whom the firm likely saw as neutral, concerned parties, not malicious actors. My reputation in certain circles was indeed damaged. Headhunters who used to call me regularly went silent. Opportunities dried up. The $2 billion deal eventually closed, but with another team, and I heard whispers that the initial hiccup caused by my abrupt departure had created significant challenges. Beyond the professional realm, there was the immense emotional toll. I felt adrift, lost. The people I had always believed were my unconditional support had proven to be anything but. The pain of the betrayal was a physical ache in my chest. I cycled through anger, grief, confusion, and despair. I questioned everything: my judgment, my ability to read people, the reality of my entire upbringing. Had this tension always been there, unseen by me? Had I been naive to think their resentment wasn't capable of such destructive action? I pulled away from my family almost completely. Phone calls were brief and strained, visits non-existent. It was a painful form of mourning, grieving the loss of a relationship I had always wanted but never truly had. My father, who had mostly stayed out of the initial conflict, tried to bridge the gap, but he seemed incapable of truly understanding the depth of the betrayal. He saw it as a misunderstanding that we should just get over, which only highlighted how deeply ingrained the family's dysfunction was. Healing wasn't linear. There were days I felt strong, determined to rebuild. There were other days I felt overwhelmed by the unfairness of it all, consumed by bitterness. I started seeing a therapist who helped me process the trauma and understand the complex dynamics of my family. She helped me see that their actions were not a reflection of my worth, but a manifestation of their own issues: Clara's deep-seated insecurity and Mother's controlling nature and inability to see me as an autonomous adult with her own life. Setting boundaries was crucial and incredibly hard. It meant accepting that the relationship I craved with my mother and sister might never be possible. It meant saying no to guilt trips, refusing to engage in conversations that devolved into gaslighting or blame. It meant choosing my own peace and well-being over the constant, draining struggle for their approval or understanding. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to rebuild my professional life. It wasn't easy. I had to take a step back, accept a less senior role at a smaller firm, and work twice as hard to prove myself again. But this time, my motivation felt different. It wasn't about seeking external validation from family. It was about reclaiming my own competence, rebuilding my confidence, and proving to myself that I was resilient. I focused on building a support system outside of my family. Friends, colleagues, my therapist, these were the people who saw me, believed in me, and offered genuine support. They celebrated my small victories and helped me navigate the setbacks. It was a stark contrast to the environment I had come from. Over time, the raw wound of the betrayal began to heal, leaving a scar, but no longer causing constant, debilitating pain. I learned to live with the reality of my family relationships, distant, cordial on the surface when necessary, but without true intimacy or trust. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful apologies where they truly understood the gravity of their actions. Mother continued to make excuses. Clara eventually faded into the background of my life, still orbiting Mother. The dynamic remained, just without me as a central target. Today, my life looks different. My career is back on track, not exactly where it was heading with that $2 billion deal, but stable and fulfilling. More importantly, I am different. I am stronger, clearer on my own worth, and fiercely protective of my boundaries. The experience taught me valuable, albeit painful, lessons about trust, about the hidden costs of unresolved family dynamics, and about the importance of listening to your intuition, even when it tells you something uncomfortable about the people closest to you. It also taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to distance yourself from toxic relationships, even if they are family. It's not about not loving them, it's about loving yourself more. It's about recognizing that you cannot heal in the environment that made you sick. The $2 billion, the 4 clients, they vanished. But I didn't. I survived. And in surviving, in rebuilding my life from the ground up after being shattered by the people who were supposed to build me up, I found a strength I never knew I had. I found my voice, and I learned to use it to protect myself and speak my truth. Thank you for listening to my story. It's not an easy one to tell, but I felt it was important to share because I know there are so many others out there dealing with similar forms of betrayal, often from the people they least expect. If anything in my story resonated with you, the feeling of being misunderstood by your family, the pain of betrayal, the struggle to rebuild after a major setback, please hit that like button. It helps me know these stories are reaching the people who need to hear them. Have you ever had to confront a family member about a significant betrayal or misunderstanding? How did you navigate setting boundaries in difficult relationships? Share your experiences and insights in the comments below. Reading your stories helps us all feel less alone. And if you want to hear more stories about navigating complex relationships, finding your voice, and rebuilding your life after challenges, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Remember, your worth is not determined by others' inability to appreciate you or their willingness to harm you. Speak your truth, protect your peace, and keep rebuilding one brick at a time.